Okay, welcome back to Nick Lenz Comic Corner Classic Let Known Classics. This is episode number 1416. Excuse me. And Doubleshot number 1310. I had to fix that later. Alright, I got two trades. One is a crossover, the other is a companion to a big story going on in Amazing Spider-Man. First up it is XMen X of Swords. I should point out though, this trade paperback is really freaking long. It is 705 pages because this contains the entire crossover. In the past, when Marvel did stuff like this, they didn't have like a lot of the time this stuff collected in like one trade. Usually to get about 2 or 3 trades in order to have this whole storyline. Lately, they've been just shoving everything in one trade to just basically like one big epic trade here. These are the issues that are part of this crossover. X of Swords, Creation, Stasis, Destruction is just basically a series of one-shots. X-Men Volume 5, issues 12 to 15. Yeah, this one takes up most of the storyline here. Excalibur, Volume 4, issues 13 to 15. Marauders, 13 to 15. X-Force, Volume, I believe this is Volume 6, issues 13 to 14. New Mutants, Volume, I believe it's 4, issue 13. Wolverine, Volume, I believe this is Volume 7, issues 6 and 7. Cable, Volume 4, 4, issues 5 and 6. Helions 5 and 6, and X Factor Volume 4, issue number 4. Now, who writes some of these stories? Well, Jonathan Hickman obviously writes X-Men, Excalibur. All the rest of these books are done by the regular writers. New Mutants, surprisingly, is not. Now, at the start of the story, when this one was started up, he was the writer for it, but not anymore. Yes. So, these who write the stories. For the prelude from X-Men 12, that's done by Jonathan Hickman. X-Force Creations, Jonathan Hickman, Tina Howard. X-Factor, Leah Williams. Wolverine, obviously, is done by Ben Percy, so is X-Force. Marauders is done by Viltalia Alia, which is kind of interesting, though. They swapped from Gary Duggan. Zeb Wells is the regular writer for Helions. And Bronze, issue 13. I believe this was the last issue he did for the series, because currently it's done by Viltalia. They basically go back to Cable, of course, written by his regular writer. Cable, Excalibur, those written by his regular writers. Basically, Gary Duggan and Excalibur by Tina Howard. Let's see. X-Force Stasis is also by Jonathan Hickman, Tina Howard. Gary Duggan comes back to Marauders for a couple issues. Well, Covert Ben Percy. Yeah. This crossover lasted for a pretty good period of time. What is the X-Swords crossover? Is technically, in a way, the very first crossover under the Jonathan Hickman initiative of Krakatoa. Oh, and here's something interesting though. Because the crossover, there is a death. Only one official death, the whole crossover. And who is it? Rockslide. Yep, Rockslide gets killed off at the start of this crossover. And surprisingly, because if you read the X-Men books, basically right now, they have this thing where if anybody dies, they don't say dead. They say they maybe an issue and they come back for a next issue. Because they're all connected to Krakatoa, and they pretty much get reborn on Krakatoa. Rockslide couldn't because he died in Otherworld. Yes, because he died in Otherworld, he can't be resurrected. Because it's not the regular plane, so if he dies there, he can't be brought back. And throughout the storyline, they basically can't use... one of the consequences of the storyline, they temporarily suspend the resurrection protocols. They temporarily suspend them, and they're thinking about closing the gates. The first portion of the story, I'd say the first act, is simply gathering up these 9 swords. Of course, these swords are made up of people like... These people gather all of these particular swords. You have Cypher basically having the Warlock sword, basically Warlock. You have Magic using your Soul Sword. You have Wolverine using the Massimo Blade. You have Storm. Storm's blade is quite unique because she had the seal of Wakanda. and get on her, or basically the man she loves, bad side. Mostly, anyways. Cable, of course, had to go to space to steal the sword from a space station. Oh, here's something quite interesting about this story. Apparently, the Peak has been discovered. Yes, the Peak. Yes, from the agency's sword, which has been somewhat defunct for the past, well, at the time when this came out last year. They have not been active in Marvel Comics in 5 years. Like, what the heck took them so long to bring this group back? I have no idea. I mean, a lot of people thought, though, they would replace this group already with the Alpha Flight program. But because of the event Empire, it's been kind of deemed unnecessary. Unknown exactly what happened to the program. It's not really mentioned happened here. Yeah, somehow they found it, and they actually go to the space station, and there's nobody there. It's completely abandoned. Like, here it is, completely intact, even though when it was previously seen, it was pretty much knocked down by the Apocalypse Twins in the pages of Uncanny Avengers. This is way back, I think it was like 2013, I think it was. Here it is, all fixed. Yep. And one of the most interesting things, now, who are the other people who got swords? Let's see. I think it was, I'm trying to remember the 9 swords. I think, Betsy Braddock got a sword. Apocalypse himself is one of the... It's the one thing you gotta love with this crossover. It seems as though like every single active member of the X-Men, a lot of them per se, get a lot to do in this crossover. Like, heck, even Apocalypse. Yes, he plays a role in the story. As a matter of fact, he plays a role in the deciding factor of the conclusion of the story. Now, mostly put for the story, it involves stuff from the Captain Britain comics, like there's appearance by Mad Jack Jaspers. Yes, Mad Jack Jaspers. If you don't know who he is, he's from the Captain Britain comics. We also have Sire. We also have, well, the current, Cyrene, I believe her name is. She's the current head of the Captain Britain Corps. Yes, how she got the position is quite unique, because the thing is, at the end of X-Men Die by Sword, it was Merlin's daughter, Roma, who took over as the head of the Captain Britain Corps. This lasted for a period of time, and after Secret Wars, now Cyrene is in charge. Yes, for some reason she's in charge. No explanation for this at all. She just is. Some people could say this crossover is just basically the X-Men trying to tie in with the Captain Britain stuff, which kind of it does. And Captain Britain himself does play a role in the story. And here's something quite strange, though. After the conclusion of the story, Captain Britain's not been seen since then. This, of course, is the original Captain Britain, Brian Braddock. And the current Captain Britain is his sister, Betsy Braddock. Yep. And what they do with some of these characters is quite interesting. Like, they have them fight various battles. Betsy, of course, participates in the battle herself. Though she gets defeated, she doesn't die, per se. Oh, yeah, and as for, like... Oh, yeah, here's something interesting, though. Cypher. Cypher has a unique battle. Trial by wedding. Yeah, he gets married to a beautiful woman. And here's something you might find interesting, though. After this crossover, his wife comes to him to Krakatoa. Yep, and they still live there. I wonder how his parents feel the fact that he got married. Yep. Which they don't really explore that very much. Yes. My friend Edgar, he has much coming. Tivia, he doesn't like this crossover due to the fact of how long it is. Oh, if you're curious though, if you try to pick this up in physical form, it is like $60. It is the same price as, well, House of X / Powers of X. Yes, it's the same price as that is that much. Because how humongous this story is. Like, oh my gosh, it is so freaking big. Oh, almost forgot to mention the artist here, yes. You have Lynn Francis Yu, who does pretty much all the X-Men issues. Well, he does X-Men 12. Let's see. I think that's the only book he works on. I think he works on all of the covers, per se. Yeah, he works on the covers, but the interior artist is somebody else. Let's see. Sword of Creation, Perry Lopez, X-Factor, Carlos Gomez, Wolverine, Victor Badavic, who also has X-Force. Marauders 13 is done by Mato Ledoi. Carmen Correa does Hellions 5. Mutants done by Rod Reese. Phil Noto, who does pretty much like... Yeah, the thing of Phil Noto is he draws the entire run for Cable. Yeah, he doesn't skip an issue. Nope, he doesn't for some reason. R.B. Silva does Excalibur 13. Muhammad Ashur does X-Men, who also does issue 24. Yeah, 13, 14 about him. Pepe Larraz, Muhammad Ashur does Exorstasis. The Marauders 14, 15, which is basically Gary Doug and Ben Percy. You have Stefano Castelli does the artwork there. Of course, Phil Noto does Excalibur 14. Wolverine is done by Joshua Carrera. Wolverine 7. X-Force, also by Joshua Carrera. You have Carmen Carino, who does issue number 6 of Helions. And you have Pepe Lopez, who does issue number... Let's see. I'm trying to figure out... Yeah, and Wolverine himself does play a role in the story, but not that big, surprisingly. Mm-hmm. Now you're probably thinking, okay, you have Magic, Warlock, Wolverine, Storm, and Cable participating in this. Okay, who are the other participants? Well, I know Betsy Braddock basically is a participant. Yep, she is a participant in this storyline. Mm-hmm. And they all take part in the big humongous battle. And they're also joined by, of course, Betsy Braddock and her brother, Brian Braddock. Yep, they're both basically joining the battle, which means you have 3 left. Okay, so who else is left to join? You're probably thinking, that's interesting. Who else is left to join the battle with the battle over swords? Because that's the unique thing about this crossover, is that this whole thing has obsession with swords. Also, if you're curious though about Apocalypse's role in the story, the person who's in charge of the other island, Akaro, is actually his wife. Yes, his wife. And also, here's the thing about Apocalypse. Apparently with the story, the guy is a grandfather, which I'm like, that's interesting. I'm not really sure how the heck that was possible, but he is. Yes, Gorgon. And we even have appearance by Gorgon, the leader of the Hand. Yep, he's here too. Why is he here? Because he's kind of in a way part of Krakatoa because he's a mutant. And of course, Wolverine is still wearing the ugly brown and yellow costume. Not really sure why. I'm like, what the heck is wrong with the other costumes? Yeah. But this storyline, in my opinion, is really good. It is well paced. And it kind of felt as though when you read the whole thing from beginning to end, you kind of felt as though that Hickman had a plan for the story and it played out thoroughly. Mostly, if you kind of think about it, it's kind of in the way to write Apocalypse out of the X-Men books for a while. Yep. That's what's the gist of it anyways. And, well, that's simply how I feel about the story. Now, the whole thing itself, I get the trade roughly a 9.5 out of 10. It's really good. I kind of wish my friend Tivio basically would like the story. Me, I love it. It is by far one crossover I thoroughly enjoyed. I've talked to someone about the crossover Empire. They didn't like it much. That was a really terrible story. I thoroughly enjoyed Empire. I thought it was a really fun story. Why am I the only one who actually likes that story, surprisingly? Yeah, I mean, I get 2020. I'm at 2020. That one was not terrible. It was just disappointing. X of Swords, really good crossover. Alright, next up it is The Amazing Spider-Man 2099 Companion. Yep. You're probably thinking, Nick, why didn't you review this when you did the trade that collected 29 issues for Amazing Spider-Man? Well, because I didn't think of reviewing that point. Simply put, for this particular storyline, these are a series of one-shots that tied into the storyline 2099, which brought back 2099 and kind of got rid of the version of it established by Peter David at the end of Spider-Man 29 Volume 325. Yep. Now, these are a series of one-shots that, now you have an Alpha Omega one-shot for 2099, obviously. Yeah, 29 Alpha and Omega done by Nick Spence. Nick Spence also Spider-Man 29. I know this 29 is Volume 4, Issue 1. You have Jody Hauser, who does Venom 2099, which you might think that's interesting, Venom 29 books, but given how popular Venom is. You have Lonnie Neer and Zach Thompson as Punisher 2099. Chip Sodesky Doom 20. This one's a really good story. And this one, even today, basically, I thought this was kind of weird. The fact that we actually had this Conan 2099. I'm like, wow. And this is run by Gary Duggan. Now, Duggan himself did write the Savage Sword Conan series for the opening story arc, and he also is the current writer for Savage Avengers, so it kind of makes sense. Fantastic Four 2099 is done by Carla Pacito. The artwork for these ones, you have Alpha is done by Victor Badavic, Francisco Madaba and Gerald Borges is Them 2099, Punisher is done by Matt Horick with Ian Morin, Doom is Marco Castelli, Conan Rick Atino, Z Carlos, who does Spider-Man 2099, Steve Cummings does Fantastic Four. You have Guillermo Sabato and Z Carlos does the Omega one. Yeah, this particular one is basically bringing back the whole thing of 2099. Now, surprisingly, some of these characters don't look like this at all. Like, for example, Doom, they give him kind of like a new backstory this one, where you give him like a new armor. Now, if you see on the cover, you see Deadpool 2099. She is not appearing in the story. Captain America 2099 does not appear in the story. Hulk. No, surprisingly, he doesn't. The Punisher does, but he does not look like this at all. This is, of course, from the 90s version. I'm not sure why they went with these looks for. They went with the 90s looks for these characters, and then when you get to the books, like, yeah. In the case of Jake's one, yeah, a lot of these ones are just reimaginings of the origin stories from the 1990s. A lot of these books did exist in the 90s. The other ones that didn't were Venom and Conan. These two did not exist in the 90s, while Punisher, Doom, Spider-Man 2099, and Fantastic Four, these did exist in that particular period of time. And, well, even though, yes, you kind of have this era of 29 reopened, this is probably Nick Spencer, in a way, basically revisiting something that was very popular, but he ends up pretty much getting rid of this particular version of 2099. Yeah, this particular version gets wiped from existence by the end of the storyline. Also, Miguel O'Hara comes back finally. After being gone for, let's see, because this certainly came out like about 2 years ago. He was gone for about 4 years, and he came back, and he reunites with his girlfriend from the Peter David run, and he's reunited with his son, Gabriel, which that's what happens in the main Amazing Spider-Man story. These are a bunch of one-shot tie-ins, just basically revisiting these characters just with new setting. Though, apparently this version is much more darker than the one from the 90s. Like, if you think that there was a dark, bleak future from the 90s, oh boy, this was a lot more terrible. Like, oh my gosh, it is so weird, this one. I gotta say, like, I would say of these one-shots, I think the Spider-Man 29 one, that was really good. I really enjoyed that one. Venom was interesting, to say at least. It's one thing, one creator, I thought was quite weird, the fact he was writing this book, but at least in the case of Doom 20, which is by Chip Sodesky, seems a bit strange he would write a book about Doctor Doom, especially as he's writing a bunch of superheroes. And in case you're curious, though, does he bring any of his comedy he's known for bringing in? Not really. It's a pretty serious story, but not as basically dreary, not as like super serious as the way it was for his Daredevil run. And basically, it's written like a very similar way that Al Ewing writes Immortal Hulk. It's very similar. The Punisher one is just okay. I think it's quite interesting. I think the Spider-Man 29 one, that one, I love that one. That was really good. Conan, that was surprisingly really good. I was not expecting Conan 2099 to be that good. Venom was just Venom. It's good. I think Jodie Hauser himself, she's a good writer. I kind of thought it was quite strange she's writing Venom. Yeah. Yes, but in the case of this one altogether, it's a good storyline for 2099 revisiting. Of course, this is 29 companion. Basically, this is the first of 2 times that the Amazing Spider-Man series done this, where they have something that goes alongside the main series. Of course, they just recently with the Last Remains crossover, Last Remains storyline, which was really good. And I like the main storyline for 2099. This, of course, is a tie-in to it. And a bit more expansion on the main story, which is great. And, of course, well, lately, here's the thing. Excuse me. Nick Smith had this thing where he has, like, a giant-sized one-shot. Excuse me. To conclude the main storyline for these particular storylines. I'm not really sure why he does it for, just that he does. But in the case of Amazing Spider-Man 29, Amazing Spider-Man 29 Companion, I give this book roughly, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I would say, if you want to think of probably what is the weakest one-shot of all these stories, it is probably Punisher. Yes, this one's probably the weakest one. Doom and Spider-Man 2099, those two, they're both really good. I think both have done really well. Conan is surprisingly really strong, but I think that probably the weakest one is probably Venom. Also, there's a really neat nod to Absolute Carnage when they have one of the characters have the symbol from Absolute Carnage appear in that story, which was good. Yep. So yeah, that's it for particular review. Stay tuned. More Comic Corners coming soon. As for what I'm going to do next, it's probably going to be Captain America again. Yep. More Brubaker stuff from Captain America. Okay? Next video. Bye.